Metafiction, or fiction reflecting on the nature of fiction.
Metafiction is not something new in literature. In fact, it's been around for a while. Postmodernism isn't quite as old and refers to the different trends that started to pop up in the last century or so. These involve challenging the traditional ways in which literature, for example, is presented.
For example, it takes the idea of how stories tend to go and turns that idea on its head, using strategies such as breaking boundaries, indeterminacy, parody, pastiche, and multiple viewpoints. Metafictive devices are tools of choice for postmodern literature. They are the author's way of drawing the reader's attention to various elements of text. The wonderful thing about children's books is that this can be done using both words and pictures. Several authors, including Sylvia Pantaleo, have enumerated a list of metafictive devices. Take a look. Generally, 2 or more of these devices are used together.
When I first learned about metafiction, my first thought was immediately for one of my toddler's favorites. There's a monster at the end of this book. And its more recent counterpart, there's another monster at the end of this book.
Throughout the book, Grover and Elmo have conflicting ideas about whether or not the reader should actually keep turning the pages because of what might come at the end of the book. Though Grover is talking to Elmo is talking directly to the readers, instructing them to keep turning the pages.
One great book for seeing metafictive devices at work is The True Story of the Three Little Pigs by Jon Scieszka. It's a different take on the traditional tale of the Three Little Pigs. Metafiction is present right from the get-go. Looking at the cover, we see that the book is supposedly written by one of the characters, Alexander T. Wolfe. The book begins with the wolf addressing the reader directly. He claims that the traditional story of the Three Little Pigs is all wrong, and draws the reader in by promising to let him in on a little secret. Commenting on his own story, he informs the reader that we've got it all wrong.
So he sets out to tell the reader the real story. You'll notice the font here is made up of hay, pig snouts, wolves' tails, bricks, and other elements from the story.
The wolf claims that he just wanted to make a birthday cake for Granny and ran out of sugar. Let's pause here for a moment and take a look at this illustration. Do you see the bunny ears in the cake? That certainly doesn't seem so innocent. And take a look at Granny's picture hanging on the wall. I could be mistaken, but she looks just like the wolf that Little Red Riding Hood encountered when she was going to go visit her granny. So it's possible that we've opened the door to another text. Getting back to our story, our friend the wolf has realized that he doesn't have enough sugar, so he's going to borrow one from the neighbors who, of course, happen to be the pigs. An unanswered knock at the first house is followed by a giant sneeze, which of course blows the house down, and there, in the ruins, lies poor pig number 1, dead as a doornail.
When the wolf does the unthinkable, he tries to justify himself, asking the reader to compare his decision of gobbling up the poor little pig to what their reaction would be if they came across a big cheeseburger just lying there.
A similar event happens at the second house, and once again the wolf tries to justify his actions to the reader by reminding us that food can spoil, and what a waste that would be.
Notice the font on the letter N? This is the wolf's telling of the story. But somehow I'm getting a clue that there's a connection between the sausages and his neighbors. At least in the wolf's mind, anyway. Things come to a head when the wolf knocks on the brick house, is provoked by an unkind pig who says something nasty about his grandma, and after making a big scene is arrested and sent to jail. Now the news reporters changed the story entirely to make it more exciting. Remember that connection to the Little Red Riding Hood tale? There it is again.
Sometimes metafictive devices involve having a story within a story. In Interrupting Chicken by David Ezra Stein, it's bedtime for Little Chicken, and Papa is going to read a story. Little Chicken promises not to interrupt the story, but of course, the minute he starts reading,
Little Chicken jumps in and warns the characters in the story, Hansel and Gretel, not to go in. So they don't. Phew! That was close. So not only are we seeing a story within a story, we're also seeing a character in the main story interfering and changing the course of events. No matter how many stories Papa tries to read, Red Riding Hood, Chicken Little, our friend Little Chicken can't help herself. She has to keep saving the characters. In the end, they run out of stories, so Papa suggests that Chicken tell her own story. And we see our character, Little Chicken, become an author herself. She creates a story which puts Papa to sleep. For those of us who have toddlers, we know how that feels.
breaking boundaries is a great way to find out where those limits really are. Again, anyone who has young children can attest to that. The same is true for metafictive devices. When an author breaks the rules, she or he becomes the reader's accomplice in studying a text. It's kind of like the author giving the reader a wink that says, "We both know how this is supposed to go, but let's shake things up a bit." Metafictive devices force readers to engage more deeply and also enhance the pure pleasure of reading, simply because the authors are breaking the rules in a playful way and doing something unexpected. Not all metafiction is funny, as attested by The Great Voices in the Park by Anthony Browne, but all metafiction does make the reader think beyond what they might in a more traditional narrative structure.